And stocks on Wall Street looked ready to relax their grip on record levels that they opened on Tuesday as traders focused on the next wave of key earnings. Reports from banking majors Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs are on deck. Now, let's see what the futures are doing now. The futures for the Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 1 point to 22,901, while those for the S&P 500 slipped 0.04% to 2,555.5. Nasdaq 100 futures were down 0.04% at 6,118.25. And staying with the markets now, Japanese markets closed higher for an 11th straight session, while a broader index of other Asian shares was little changed on Tuesday. The Nikkei 225 rose yet again, closing up at 0.38% at 21,336.12. South Korea's benchmark Kospi index advanced 0.17%, reaching 2,484.37, as steelmakers parked some gains made in the last session. The S&P ASX 200 gained 0.73%, ending at 5,889.6, with the material sub-index adding to overnight gains and climbing 1.02% by the end of the day. The Shanghai Composite closed down 0.15% at 3,373.43, and the Shenzhen Composite tacked turned 0.1%, finishing the session at 2,008.06. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index traded 0.02% above a flat line. Away from the markets now, the International Monetary Fund has raised concern over the impact of Kenya's presidential rerun election on the country's economy. The IMF says the issue is raising the country's risk profile among investors and weighing down an already sluggish economic growth. The IMF has lowered its 2017 economic growth forecast for Kenya to 5%, after expansion slowed in the first half of the year due to a drought that led to a contraction in farming output and pushed up food prices. However, the IMF predicts that economic growth may pick up in 2018 on a more stable political environment after the forthcoming elections and a modest improvement in agriculture production. The IMF will hold talks with the Kenyan government on a $1.5 billion standby facility that's meant to buffer the nation from excessive external shocks after elections are concluded. Meanwhile, the Zambian government and the International Monetary Fund have reached an agreement towards the country's debt sustainability after the IMF raised the red flag over Zambia's debt distress. The Ministry of Finance explains that government has agreed to provide data on recent developments in the economy, the 2018 budget and borrowing plans. Once this data had been reviewed and validated, the IMF would field a staff visit to Zambia with the objective of redefining the macroeconomic framework. Well, this comes about a week after the IMF said Zambia's publicly guaranteed debt increased from 36% of gross domestic products at the end of 2014 to 60% at the end of 2016. And the government of Zimbabwe has banned imports of fruits and vegetables with immediate effect to preserve scarce foreign exchange. The country's agriculture minister, Joseph Mert, says that the ban would allow local farmers to increase output while saving the country's foreign currency. Well, according to Zimbabwe's National Statistics Agency, the country spent more than $80 million in fruit and vegetables in 2016. In June, the government banned maize imports, saying the country produced enough to satisfy domestic demand. Zimbabwe relies heavily on cheaper imports from neighboring South Africa, and that's its biggest trading partner, and has over the years struggled to produce enough to meet domestic demand. And in South Africa, McKinsey & Co says it's embarrassed by errors that the company made while working with the South African utility Eskom on a $120 million contract that is being investigated by Parliament and police over allegations of fraud. The world's largest management consultancy says it had parted ways with some staff involved in its work in Eskom. Well, McKinsey's first admission of wrongdoing in the scandal broke since July, and it said an internal investigation had found violations of its professional standards but did not uncover any acts of bribery or corruption. The company is suspending work for state companies in South Africa until after a review by its newly formed risk committee. MCKINSEY has offered to repay about $75 million in fees it's received from Eskom if a court finds its contract was unlawful. In the meantime, South Africa's Impala Platinum is investing $30 million for a 15% interest in the platinum projects in the northern Waterberg region. The deal comes with an option to acquire a majority stake in the development. The stake is being acquired from Platinum Group Metals Limited and state-run Japan Oil and Gas and Metals National Corporation. Implats will carry out a definitive feasibility study of the project. Following its approval, it will have 90 business days to decide which way to go. We'll have our eyes on the commodities markets when we return in a moment. Do stay with us.